Let's talk about genetics on the Teal Couch today. I'm Golda Arthur. I'm the host and creator of the Overlooked podcast, a women's health show. I'm here with Pamela Esposito Amory, the CEO and co-founder of Tell Every Amazing Lady. We're at the T.E.A.L Community Center in Brooklyn, New York, on this blinged out, fabulous teal couch. And I'm super excited to get into the conversation about women's health with you today. Before I had my surgery, you and I had a conversation, and I remember being so grateful to you for that conversation because we do all have this fear of the unknown, as you and I have talked about before. And that just really steadied me talking to you, and I remain grateful for that. But I wanted to talk about prophylactic removal of the ovaries and fallopian tubes as well. Because this puts you into menopause. The removal of the ovaries puts you into menopause. And so it's like, click, instant menopause, there you are, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I have both had this experience, even though our family history is a little bit different, our genetics are a little bit different. So let me start there in trying to understand how to even think about surgical menopause, how to survive it, how to, think about prophylactic surgical menopause. Let's start with your genetics and how you realized that this needed to be done for yourself.
Yeah, so I can tell a little bit about my story, but it also connects to a wide range of the general public where my sister had cancer. She happened to have ovarian cancer. So when she was diagnosed, she had conversations with her doctors and they advised that she get genetic testing done. Well, she was positive for something called Lynch syndrome. So then they advised, hey, how about you get other people in your family to test for it too, because there might be others. So myself and some other family members got tested, and I learned that I had Lynch syndrome. And from that moment on, all of my doctors were telling me, you should have you should need a hysterectomy and have it as soon as you can. And I was not ready or prepared for that information. But the sort of point of this story is, it started out with my sister's diagnosis, and it's sort of helping to figure out her cancer treatment, what kind of chemotherapy that she should have, what course of treatment she should have, because that's where science is going and has really improved in many ways. So I offered to get tested too, because they were trying to also find connections to her treatment. So then when I got my advice and my answers that I was positive and I should have this surgery done, I knew, and many of you should know, is you do it when it's right for you. Even though the doctors were telling me you should have a hysterectomy, it was a risk-reducing hysterectomy. It was not something that there was an exact reason besides genetics and a high risk. It was to reduce my risk and to try to do it around the same age, or at least a little before the same age that my sister was diagnosed with her cancer, which was young, in her 40s. So I waited many years until I was ready. And when I decided to have that done, it was a personal choice. So we highly advise and speak to a genetic counselor who can give you that guidance and support and figure out if genetic testing is even right for you to begin with. Now, we had a strong family history of not only ovarian cancer, but colon cancer, as well. We later found esophageal cancer and prostate cancer. So we started to see the threads within the family, and we learned some of that in a genetic counseling session. We drew the family tree, and it's a very relaxed environment and important for families to think about if that's appropriate for them.
What is Lynch syndrome? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So many people might have heard of BRCA. That Angelina Jolie actually came out with a New York Times op-ed many years ago that she had a family history and she got genetic testing done. So I mentioned BRCA because Lynch syndrome and BRCA are very similar. They just increase your risk for certain cancers. So BRCA, using Angelina Jolie as an example, she has a strong family history of breast and ovarian cancer. Her mother, her grandmother, and her aunt all had ovarian cancer or breast cancer. And so she decided to get genetic testing done. She found that she has BRCA in her family, and so she decided to have what's called an oophorectomy, where she removed her ovaries and her fallopian tubes. And then later on, she wound up having a mastectomy. So those were prophylactic surgeries. She did not have cancer, but she reduced her risk tremendously from these, a surgical procedure. And so Lynch syndrome is sort of similar. Lynch syndrome actually increases your risk for colon cancer and ovarian cancer and many others, just like BRCA as well. There's just a lot of cancers, but those are sort of like the top tier high numbers. Uterine cancer is pretty high for Lynch syndrome as well. So when I decided to have my hysterectomy, it was highly advised not to just remove the ovaries, but also the uterus as well. And then we wound up actually removing everything because the risk was there.
And so my side of the story is that my genetic mutation is RAD51C, which is fairly rare, I think. Although I will say, when in the middle of Overlooked, I got an email from somebody in Australia to say that they also had RAD51C, and so it helps me feel a little bit less rare. But something you said that I'm really curious about, of course, I sat on even trying to get a genetics test. I really postponed that much longer than I should have because I was afraid of what would come, and I didn't want to take it seriously. I didn't think that I would be drawn into this, and of course I was, because there's no running away from your genes at the end of the day, right? So something you said earlier I want to ask about. You talked about being ready for it, and I know it took me a long time to feel like I was ready for it. What about you? When did you know that you were ready for it? Was it a gradual realization, or was it sort of a moment of clarity?
Well, when I found out, when I got genetic testing done and they told me that I should have a hysterectomy at some point, I knew it was going to be when, but not if. It was, I kind of talk about it when I have the surgery, not if I'm going to have the surgery. I knew I would do it, knew in my heart it was the right thing to do because my sister had died from ovarian cancer, that I should protect myself in the little ways we can because there's no screening test for ovarian cancer. So I did a lot of research, and I also not only researched the surgery and the genes that I had and really understanding that, but also what would happen after the surgery, because you go into surgical menopause. And so those sort of things were important for me to talk with all of my doctors about. I have specialists in different areas. I've got other health conditions myself. And so needed to make sure that I was doing it at the right time in the right way and had to feel really comfortable with it. So for anybody, even considering this, it is a personal choice. It could be advised to you if there's a strong family history, but it's really important to just educate yourself about it and feel really comfortable. I also took time to figure out what doctor to use and what it would look like afterwards. So it took a while. It took years for me to decide, okay, this is the year I'm going to do it.
It is such a big decision, right? And it's not a decision that you can go back on. So obviously being ready for it is important. I'm thinking back now, was I ever actually truly ready? I know I said I was ready. I'm not sure that I was. One thing that makes a big difference is the medical professional that you're working with. And I had a truly excellent gynecologic oncologist working with me, who made me feel steady every step of the way. He answered questions I didn't know I even had. And that's a big deal for me because I always have a lot of questions. Yeah. So I think I felt like I was in safe hands, and that feeling of safety and like this, what is a life decision, what is a body decision, is just crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. I had the same. I went with a gynecologist oncologist, which, because of family history and the gene is important to consider if you're able to do that instead of a gynecologist. There were things that I also didn't know. I had a very interesting question pretty close to before surgery that I never even thought about, was, do I want to keep my cervix or not? And I was like, I didn't even know how to think about hold on a minute now. I had to sort of regroup and figure out what to do with that. And I did ultimately decide to take everything. So case by case and very individually, because of my exact gene that I have, certain risk factors were there because of different things that maybe my family history looked like and personal choices and decisions. I had decided to take everything. So a total full hysterectomy. There's different kinds of hysterectomies too. And again, I'm not a doctor. I can't give medical advice, but it's important to ask those questions. What kind of surgery might be appropriate for someone if you're even at that point of asking about that? A lot of other questions could come up.
So let me ask you a personal question. What was it like after the surgery? What was the menopause experience like for you?
First of all, you just go through surgery like any surgery. You're very unable to do a lot of things.
It's hard.
Not going to sugarcoat it. You must have someone with you, living with you, helping you even to the bathroom, helping you to get dressed for at least the first 48 hours or so. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
So you sort of start out that way for sure. And then it just gets better and better from there as you give your yourself that space and that time to rest and recover and take care of yourself and heal. Like any surgery, you just have to listen to the doctors with whatever they tell you. You need to give yourself that space and that time to heal and rest and recover like any surgeries, and really pay attention to the cues of what they tell you when you go home from surgery and do those things. So surgical menopause, you sort of wake up out of surgery and you can be in menopause that instantly. It could take some time to see symptoms, but that is pretty much what could happen. And, we have to remember that there's also a lot of women who've had cancer who have surgical menopause because they had to have their ovaries out or their uterus out or some other organ because of cancer. So they also are waking up in surgical menopause. We're so blessed and thankful that we were able to do this prophylactically. And as the months went on from my surgery, different types of symptoms would arise that I realized was menopause. It actually, my first hot flash was on the stretcher in the recovery room after surgery. So I came right out of surgery and was feeling okay. Like, it was just, I've had surgeries before, so it was okay. I was a little groggy, but I was fine. And I will never forget, I think they said like I could start walking around or whatever it was. I was getting up off the stretcher and I was up for a few minutes and I looked at my husband, I looked at the nurse and I was like, do I have a fever? Feel my forehead. Like, I feel like I'm burning up all of a sudden. And then it was gone like that. And the nurse looked at me and she goes, that was probably your hot flash. And it was gone in an instant. So I was like, oh, this is what it feels like. So for me, my first description was I literally felt like I had a fever. I was just burning up and then it was gone. And so I was like, okay, if that's the worst of it, it wasn't so bad because it does go away quick. For many, many months after that, I had a lot of hot flashes. They didn't really bother me that much. I felt like after other things I had been through, that was not a big deal. Some women really can't take the hot flashes, and maybe it's the worst for them. But I find hot flashes where they come and they go very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I worked very closely with my endocrinologist who got me on hormone supplements to figure out, to kind of regulate some of my hormones that now my body wasn't producing. We had tried different types of hormones and finally it took a while, but we regulated them. I had other symptoms too, but the hormones really, your body loses hormones and it's a personal choice if you're going to go on those replacements or not.
So I have a nerdy follow-up question. Why did you choose to see an endocrinologist as opposed to a gynecologist?
Great question. So I, like many women, went on the journey of trying to find a doctor who would understand me and listen to me. And so I stopped when I found a great endocrinologist who really heard me.
Right.
That's the true answer. Like how they heard me, because they weren't listening. I went from one doctor to the next, to the next, to the next. And, they might write a prescription, okay, take hormone something, or that's normal, or, they weren't terrible, but they just weren't really hearing all my list of these are side effects and these are symptoms I'm getting and what do we do. And I'm very knowledgeable. I also am at a foundation. I have a lot of resources at my fingertips, and I still struggled and went for the second opinion, the third opinion, the fourth opinion, and finally landed on my amazing endocrinologist that has really helped me over the years now to just find what I needed.
You are so great in that you went looking for someone who would listen. I think a lot of women know that their doctor is not listening, are very frustrated by that, and they stay right there. They don't, and I know that there's a lot of barriers. I know that health insurance is a thing. I know that finding a doctor, even that process of going from one to the other, is a lot of work. You really have to, sort of put time and effort into it. But I personally think it's really worth it to have your doctor listen to it. But I love that story about how you kind of looked for someone who heard you. That's super important.
And it wasn't just that I even set out for an endocrinologist, because I tried gynecologist. I, tried back with trying the gynecology oncology realm because I had the family history. So I tried I tried primary care, kind of went around to different types of doctors, and the endocrinologist wound up being the right fit for what I needed to get the hormones in balance.
Yeah. So for me, it's been about, a few months since my surgery. For you, I think a couple of years. Has it changed how you see your body? Because I'm trying to still figure out, how do I feel about my body now? What is different? How has my relationship to my body changed? And I wanted to ask you how you feel about that, whether, how things change for you.
Definitely. It's like the pre-surgery body and the after-surgery body. I definitely have found that I really need to pay attention to the foods that I eat and exercising is so much more important. And I don't say that lightly. I actually can feel differently if I eat certain things. Trying to cut back on sugar or something. I actually was finding for a while if I ate certain things, my hot flashes would be worse. And, doing different dietary adjustments made me feel better. So I've worked really hard on that. And then also exercise. So the body's definitely different. You sort of have other symptoms that pop up and you question, is that menopause? Is that something else? What's happening here? And I think we pay attention more to our body after a surgical menopause because we're not sure. And menopause is sort of this unknown abyss to a lot of women with so many symptoms, and a lot of things just get, sure, that's probably menopause. Sure, that's probably menopause. We have to be careful with that because it could be something else. And we don't want to worry about everything, but it is still important to check with your doctor on, is this normal? Maybe you do need to regulate a hormone or you need to ask other questions. So it's still important to have those conversations with each other and with your medical professional.
Yeah. So I want to take this back to the fact that, so here we are, you and me, on the T.E.A.L couch in your community center in Brooklyn. And, we met going back 6 years now. We met going back because I was thinking about making this podcast, and here we are without our ovaries on the T.E.A.L couch, with my mother having ovarian cancer and your sister had ovarian cancer. So really, the fact that we're in surgical menopause as a way to prevent us from getting ovarian cancer. In one way, that's kind of a marvel of science,
Absolutely.
Isn't it? Because for the longest time, we didn't understand this cancer at all. We had no foothold in how to try and start to diagnose it and screen it and solve it. And now we're so much further along. It's something to be optimistic about.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's not for everyone, though. But because we don't have a screening test, this was really empowering to me and for you where, we can't go for an annual exam for ovarian cancer. It doesn't exist. We can do everything we're supposed to, look for those signs and symptoms, and we know about our risk factors, but this was a big decision to really reduce our risk. It's so important that we actually can be empowered by that, where science is, and it is exciting that it's something that we can, choose or not to choose. Just like for someone with breast cancer and those high-risk breast cancer patients who choose to have a mastectomy, that's life-saving. There's families that you can run through the whole family line and they've had breast cancer or ovarian and other cancers that are linked to genes, and we have this information now that can really save lives.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing there being, find a good doctor that you can work with them, because any conversation about the prophylactic removal of your organs or surgical menopause needs to be something that begins and ends with your doctor, right?
Yeah, and there's so many factors into it. This surgery, should not be taken lightly because it does affect a lot of different parts of your body. So, I was saying before, I see an endocrinologist now. I went to a gynecologist oncologist. My primary care doctor also, I had lots of conversations with, that doctor and other specialists I have about the whole body effect that this surgery would have on me. So it's really important to understand that, ask a lot of questions, and you have to feel comfortable with that decision because you can't go back.
Yeah.
It's an important surgery.
Yeah. Another thing I'm excited about now is we're starting to look at the ovaries in a way we've never done before. We're starting to find out much more information. We're starting to learn about the connection between the ovaries and brain health and longevity. I love this focus on the ovaries. It's long overdue. I'm not going to complain about that. At least we're here. At least we're learning about it, right?
Yeah, it affects so many parts of the body for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Pamela, thank you so much again for inviting me down to the T.E.A.L Community Center here in Brooklyn. It's such a great space. I always like coming down here. And thank you so much for your support as well. I was so pleased when I was able to talk to you before I headed into my surgery. It was such a great comfort. And I would love to continue the conversation about women's health in any way that we can.
Great. Thank you.